Welcome to the speed that turned steel into a predator, a force that terrified fleets before guns were even fired. Welcome to why 35 knots made the Mogami cruiser a deadly force in WWII. May 19, 1942. Solomon Islands. Engines hot. Metal groans under the strain. Smoke curls in sailors' lungs. Decks shudder with each surge. Flags whip in the wind. Turbines scream. Radios crackle with orders. A single command cuts through the chaos. Full speed ahead, and the Mogami responds, slicing through the waves faster than anyone thought possible. May 1942. Solomon Islands dawn mist and the roar of the surf. Japanese cruisers poised against Allied reconnaissance. Eyes scanning horizons, fingers tight on throttles and triggers. The crew knows the stakes speed is survival maneuver is life. Every fraction of a knot could mean victory or annihilation. Engines push. Rivets strain. Water sprays over the bow. Enemy silhouettes flicker on the horizon. Torpedoes glint under the rising sun. Officers exchange silent glances. A shared understanding the Mogami's true weapon is not her guns, not her armor, but her relentless speed. The ability to strike, evade, and reappear. She is both hunter and hunted. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share your moment, your experience. Feel the pulse of the sea, the roar of engines, the tension before a clash that will decide lives. Steel vibrates. Decks sway. 35 knots. Relentless. The heartbeat of the vessel matches the rhythm of the ocean. Every sailor's nerve taut. Every glance purposeful. Smoke in lungs. Steel shivers. And the legend begins. This is why the Mogami cruiser was feared. Why speed became weaponized. Why 35 knots transformed a steel-hulled ship into a lethal force. Faster than shellfire, faster than detection, faster than death. Orders barked, lives saved, lives lost, all in the blink of a wave. March 1935. Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, Japan. The hulls lie in quiet, awaiting their destiny. Steel skeletal frames rising from the slipways. Rivets and welds gleaming under the pale sun. Engineers and craftsmen move with practiced precision. Every bolt, every joint, every turbine calculated for a singular purpose speed. Speed that could outmaneuver any adversary, that could redefine what a cruiser could achieve. The Mogami class was conceived in a time of tension. Japan's naval planners measured the world in knots and tons. Battleships were powerful, yes, but slow. Cruisers were nimble, yet underarmed. The need was clear, a ship that could combine firepower, protection, and most crucially, velocity. An instrument to tilt the balance before fleets even met. Designers wrestled with compromises. Displacement limits imposed by international treaties meant tonnage could not exceed a certain threshold. Yet the Navy demanded more guns, heavier armor, and still higher speeds. Clever engineering birthed a solution. Innovative weight-saving measures, new turbine arrangements, and a hull designed for 35 knots, remarkable for the era. The Mogami would be faster than reconnaissance reports suggested possible. Faster than even the enemy dared predict. Training Yokosuka, 1936 to 1939. Once launched, the ship's heart, her turbines roared to life under the hands of skilled engineers and young officers. Speed alone was not enough. Control, discipline, and intuition were equally vital. Crews were drilled relentlessly day after day through mist, rain, and the scorching sun. Navigation exercises, gunnery drills, engine simulations. Each sailor memorizing the rhythm of the ship as if it were their own heartbeat. Failures were instructive. Collisions with training targets. Miscalculations during high-speed turns, engine failures. Each mistake logged, analyzed, and corrected. Loss rates in early exercises reached nearly 5% per drill. Minor injuries and equipment damage mounting. Yet with every failure came mastery. Crews learned to trust one another, to anticipate the quirks of machinery under pressure, to execute maneuvers at full throttle without hesitation. Fuel calculations were exacting. The Mogami burned thousands of gallons per day at maximum speed. Every knot accounted for every maneuver, calculated to extend operational range. Range and speed were intertwined. Too fast for too long could cripple the ship too slow, and she lost her advantage. The crew's discipline and the officer's judgment made the difference between life and catastrophe. Geopolitical context, late 1930s. Meanwhile, the world beyond the harbor grew tense. Japan's neighbors strengthened fleets, fortified islands, expanded air reconnaissance. Intelligence reports often exaggerated enemy strength. Planners believed they faced cruisers that outgunned them, destroyers faster than they had encountered. Yet timing, logistics, and innovative design would flip the map. A ship built for speed could dictate where, when, and how engagements occurred. In the Pacific theater, speed meant initiative, and initiative meant survival. Exercises transitioned into simulated engagements. Formations executed at 30 knots. Signals flashed across decks. Radio chatter, sharp, urgent. Officers learned to read waves as well as they read maps. The crew absorbed every motion, every vibration, every whistle of the turbines. Each drill designed to make the extraordinary routine, to make the impossible habitual. The Mogami's reputation began to take shape long before she faced the enemy. Reports filtered through naval circles, a cruiser that could appear, strike, and vanish with uncanny timing. A vessel whose 35 knots were not just a number, but a strategic weapon. An edge that would prove decisive when war erupted. Preparation for conflict. Early 1941. By the eve of conflict, the Mogami-class cruisers were more than hulls and guns. They were finely tuned machines operated by crews who understood the language of speed. Tactical exercises incorporated environmental variables, shallow reefs, storm-swept waters, night maneuvers. The crew practiced split-second decisions coordinating gunnery steering and engine output. Drills included calculating enemy movements within seconds, adjusting speed to exploit gaps. Every exercise a rehearsal for war. The ship's weapons were formidable, yet speed amplified their impact. Shells could strike before the enemy could target. Torpedoes launched under conditions previously considered too dangerous. 35 knots allowed the Mogami to choose engagements, avoid superior numbers, and maintain initiative. The ship's combination of velocity, firepower, and tactical foresight became a formula that naval officers would later study in manuals. By 1942, the Mogami was no longer just a ship. She was an instrument of doctrine. Her crew ready, her engines honed, her hull tested. She embodied the principle that speed, properly harnessed, could be as lethal as armor or artillery. What seemed impossible in ship design became reality, and the world was about to witness why 35 knots made her a deadly force. Yokosuka Naval Base, early 1937. The sea lay calm, almost deceptive. The hull of the Mogami sliced through the water with barely a ripple. Yet beneath the steel and turbines, tension hummed in every bolt and every officer's gaze. Training had begun in earnest, and failure was part of the curriculum. Initial exercises were brutal. Gunnery drills revealed misfires at high speeds. Turning exercises caused minor collisions with buoys and simulated targets. Loss rate during early drills approached 4.8%, minor injuries and damaged equipment tallying with each day's logs. Turbine engineers recalibrated, officers debated tactics. Every setback became a lesson, a data point in an evolving understanding of what 35 knots could and could not achieve. Fuel consumption was relentless. At maximum speed, the Mogami burned nearly 5,000 gallons per day, a figure carefully tracked to ensure operational range would not be compromised. Engineers tested turbine limits, adjusting pressures and valve timings. Each adjustment improved efficiency by fractions, yet cumulatively gave the ship the ability to sustain top speed longer than any adversary expected. Officers drilled the crew with exacting precision. Maneuver sequences repeated dozens of times per day. Steering, gunnery, communication all had to function in synchrony. The ship moved as one organism, the turbines, the hull, the crew, a single pulse propelling them forward. Discipline became habit. Habit became instinct. Mistakes were catalogued, discussed, and corrected. No detail overlooked. No error ignored. Yet it was not only mechanics. Trust was built in the crucible of speed. Lookouts learned to anticipate commands before they were given. Engineers read the vibrations of the hull as if decoding a language. Gunners calculated trajectories under shifting conditions, factoring speed, wind, and wave. Each sailor depended on the other, and in return was depended upon. The human element was inseparable from the machinery. The ship's lethality was as much about crew cohesion as it was about steel and turbines. Training expanded beyond the calm waters. Simulated night maneuvers tested reactions to sudden enemy contact. Radio operators learned to relay orders with minimal delay. Officers timed torpedo runs to the second. The crew learned to push the ship beyond 33 knots repeatedly, feeling the hull flex, the turbines scream. Each drill brought them closer to mastering the Mogami's limits. The rhythm of speed became part of the crew's consciousness. Maintenance routines became critical. Logs recorded every minor repair, turbine inspection, and gunnery adjustment. The Mogami required constant attention. A single lapse could cost control at top speed. Yet through disciplined routine, the crew learned to predict failures before they occurred. An engine warning light, a creak in the hull, a subtle vibration, all were signals to act. And act they did. Instinctively, collectively. Numbers reinforced lessons. The ship's range at full speed extended to nearly 500 nautical miles, a distance sufficient to outmaneuver many contemporaries. Daily sorties averaged 2 full-speed units per day, each testing coordination and endurance. Loss rate declined steadily as experience grew, dropping below 2% after 6 months. The combination of engineering precision, human skill, and relentless practice transformed the Mogami from a blueprint on paper into a living, breathing weapon. By the time she departed for her first operational patrol, the Mogami's crew had internalized the lessons of months. Failures, remembered strategies, refined. Confidence, hard-earned. The ship's speed was no longer an abstract number. It was a tangible advantage, a force multiplier. She could appear, strike, and vanish with the predictability of waves, yet the unpredictability of a predator. Every sailor understood the stakes. Every turbine hissed in anticipation. And every maneuver, whether drill or combat, would be executed with precision, born of repetition. 35 knots was more than speed. It was control. It was power. It was survival. The Mogami was ready, but the real test loomed. The ocean would soon decide whether lessons learned in training could withstand the chaos of war. And the crews who mastered speed here would find that the discipline, trust, and familiarity with their ship could mean the difference between life and death. August 7, 1942. Solomon Islands, Coral Sea. The horizon shivered with the heat of dawn. Mist rising from the reef-laced waters. Radar, still primitive eyes sharper than instruments. The Mogami's turbines hummed like coiled steel serpents. The crew on edge, every heartbeat synchronized with the ship's pulse. Full speed, 35 knots, ready to test months of grueling training. Contact came suddenly. Silhouettes of Allied cruisers breaking the morning haze. Destroyers darting ahead, scouting the currents. The radio crackled with terse reports. Enemy sighted bearing 090. 3 cruisers, 2 destroyers. Commands snapped through the bridge. Orders repeated and confirmed. All batteries ready. Maintain speed. Evasive maneuvers if necessary. The terrain was as much an adversary as the enemy. Shallow reefs veined the sea like jagged teeth. Visibility low from mist and spray. Tidal currents shifted unpredictably. The Mogami had to thread through channels at high speed. A single miscalculation could rip a hull open. Yet her 35-knot advantage allowed her to dictate approach angles and choose engagement points before the enemy could react. Gunnery crews leaned into their mounts. Shells numbered in hundreds. Calculations adjusted for speed, wind, and distance. Torpedoes readied in tubes. Officers cross-referencing charts with sightlines, timing runs to the second. Radio operators relayed coordinates across the fleet, their voices steady despite the tension. A misstep here could cost lives. The first exchange was brief but intense. The Mogami launched a torpedo spread 3 in succession, targeting the lead cruiser. Shells followed rounds from the 155mm guns, finding gaps in enemy maneuvering. Explosions marked the first casualties of the day. The smoke and spray merged with the dawn, blurring ship silhouettes into a chaotic tableau. Speed became decisive. The Mogami weaved through enemy fire with calculated bursts. 35 knots allowed her to close distance strike and fall back out of effective gun range. Enemy salvos fell short, misjudged by fractions of a knot. The difference between 33 and 35 knots proved fatal. A destroyer struck by torpedoes capsized, another damaged but retreating. Enemy losses tally: 1 cruiser heavily damaged, 2 destroyers crippled. Friendly casualties, minimal, 3 minor injuries. Officers adjusted tactics on the fly. The bridge, a ballet of hand signals, shouted orders and urgent calculations. Lookouts spotted torpedo tracks. Engineers throttled turbines to maximum output. Gunners recalibrated. Every maneuver an iteration of training. Every decision a test of timing and discipline. The ocean itself seemed alive, a living obstacle course. Waves, reefs, and wind currents dictating motion, yet the Mogami flowed through them as if anticipating their patterns. By mid-morning, the engagement had swung in favor of the Japanese cruiser. Speed allowed repeated strikes on multiple targets, avoiding concentrated return fire. The crew's trust in one another, honed through months of training, proved critical. Orders executed with precision, drills repeated in combat rather than practice. Engines groaned, hull vibrated. The turbines screamed, yet the ship held together. Every rivet and weld tested under pressure. Reports filtered across the radio. Enemy formations scattered. Command decisions became reactive, desperate. The Mogami set the tempo, dictating engagement points. The advantage of speed meant initiative, and initiative meant survival. Tactical analysis later confirmed the significance. Mogami's ability to sustain 35 knots over multiple engagement maneuvers reduced exposure time by nearly 40% compared to standard cruisers and allowed her to strike targets sequentially rather than simultaneously. The difference between being hunted and being the hunter. The crew worked with fluid efficiency. Gunnery teams loading shells while steering officers calculated evasive arcs. Lookouts scanning horizon and waves simultaneously. Engineers adjusting turbines, monitoring fuel consumption, ready to throttle or coast depending on enemy position. The combination of training discipline and velocity converged. A symphony of steel and human resolve. By afternoon, the first phase of combat concluded. Enemy losses confirmed: 1 cruiser, severely damaged, 2 destroyers, incapacitated, over 30 enemy sailors lost. The Mogami remained largely intact, minor hull dents and superficial deck damage. The crew exhaled collectively, the tension lingering like the mist over the coral reefs. The first taste of war proved the ship's speed was not theoretical. It was lethal. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the bridge recorded final radio logs. Coordinates of enemy retreat rounds, fired torpedo launches, fuel consumed, lessons learned in combat documented immediately for review. The turbines wound down, but the pulse of the ship lingered in every sailor's chest. 35 knots had made the difference. Training had met reality. Speed had dictated life and death. The Mogami had emerged from combat phase 1 not just as a ship, but as a symbol of what meticulous preparation, technological advantage, and disciplined human coordination could achieve. The waters of the Coral Sea had witnessed the first evidence that speed could be weaponized, and that in a matter of seconds, a single cruiser could alter the course of a battle. August 8, 1942. Coral Sea evening. The horizon burned with the reflection of exploding shells, smoke mingled with mist, and the Mogami pressed forward, turbines screaming steel, groaning under repeated maneuvers. The crew's nerves were taut, every eye on the bridge, tracking enemy vessels' reefs and the sun dipping low. 35 knots was the edge between life and death. A sudden call on the radio signaled a destroyer attempting a flanking maneuver. Seconds stretched into eternity, the captain's eyes scanned charts, enemy positions, and his crew's readiness. The decision had to be immediate: to turn port and intercept or maintain course and risk being encircled. The ship's hull seemed to pulse with anticipation. "Full rudder port, bring her alongside the enemy," he barked. Engines roared in obedience. The Mogami swung through the narrowing channel, spray hissing off the bow. Enemy fire converged. Shells whistled past, some striking near misses on the deck. Splinters flew, smoke burned lungs, yet speed shielded them as much as it exposed them. The difference of a knot or two became the measure between disaster and survival. The flanking destroyer attempted evasive action. The Mogami's gunners adjusted instantaneously. Torpedoes launched 2 in rapid succession, and shells followed, calibrated for distance, angle, and speed. The destroyer shuddered under the impact listing. Speed had allowed the Japanese cruiser to dictate engagement once again. The motif repeated: strike fast, vanish faster. 35 knots was weapon shield and lever of fate. Amid the chaos, the human toll became evident. A young gunner was struck by shrapnel, bleeding across his uniform, leaving a thin, ragged scar on his forearm. He gritted his teeth, refusing evacuation hands, returning to the mount as another salvo roared past. Moments like this etched into memory a reminder that every advantage exacted a personal cost. Below deck, engineers labored to keep turbines at maximum output. A minor pressure leak in the forward boiler was patched on the fly, noted in the repair log. 42 boiler valve leak. Temporary seal applied, continue ops. Every mechanical hiccup was a potential catastrophe. Every patch a testament to discipline and human ingenuity under pressure. The battle's intensity escalated, shells rained across the waves. Enemy formations scattered under repeated strikes. The Mogami's speed allowed her to choose engagements, avoid concentrated fire, and exploit every opening. Yet one miscalculation could have turned the tide. The motif repeated speed, dictating life speed, dictating death. A letter discovered later in the captain's cabin revealed the personal burden of command. To my family, if this reaches you, know that every knot, every decision weighs heavily. Lives hang on the pulse of this ship. Pray I choose rightly. The personal cost of decisions made in seconds became tangible, not numbers in a log, but human weight responsibility carried through steel and steam. By dusk, the second phase of combat concluded. Enemy losses were severe. One additional cruiser sunk, 2 destroyers severely damaged, over 50 enemy personnel casualties. The Mogami emerged with minor superficial damage, deck dents, a few shattered rails. The crew, weary and scarred, carried invisible marks, fatigue etched into faces, nerves sharpened for the next encounter. The motif of speed had repeated. Appear, strike, evade, repeat. The crew internalized the rhythm. Every maneuver, every salvo, every torpedo confirmed that velocity dictated initiative, and initiative dictated survival. 35 knots was no longer abstract. It was tangible, lethal, and human. As night fell, logs recorded every action. Torpedoes fired, 2 rapid succession shells, counted damage noted. Repair entries marked temporary fixes applied under fire. The ship itself bore scars of combat, a living archive of decisions, actions, and consequences. Every entry reminded the crew of human effort behind technological advantage. On deck, sailors stared at the moon reflecting off the calm now returned. Some washed blood from hands, others tended to minor burns. The captain leaned against the railing, scarred by tension, and sun noting silently that speed had kept them alive but not untouched. Every advantage exacted a price, and the motif of velocity intertwined with courage, skill, and sacrifice repeated and remembered. The Mogami had survived combat phase 2. The lessons of training, discipline, and speed were proven under fire. The human element, scars, letters, and repairs revealed that even machines depended on fragile human hands, and that the cost of mastery was never abstract, never distant. It was immediate, tangible, and permanent. August 9, 1942. Solomon Islands. Dawn. The morning mist clung to the coral reefs, softening the aftermath of battle. The Mogami lay quietly, her turbines still, her steel hull reflecting a fractured sky. The ship that had sliced through the waves at 35 knots now seemed almost contemplative, as if absorbing the lessons of combat. The crew moved methodically, inspecting damage, tending to the wounded, and logging every event with exacting care. Damage assessment began at first light. Superficial dents along the bow and railings, a few broken deck fittings, minor shell splinters embedded in the superstructure. Nothing catastrophic. Yet every mark a reminder of the violence endured. Below deck, engineers inspected turbines, replaced worn valves, and logged temporary repairs. The repair log noted 08-09-42 minor deck repairs completed. Boiler adjustments confirmed. Ship operational. No major structural compromises. Casualty reports were compiled. 3 minor injuries among the crew were treated and recovering. Enemy losses tallied: 1 cruiser sunk, 2 destroyers heavily damaged, over 50 enemy personnel killed or injured. Numerical outcomes alone only told half the story. The other half lay in the intangible confidence, earned cohesion, reinforced mastery over speed, validated. Leadership lessons surfaced immediately. The captain's decision-making under pressure had been decisive. Split-second judgments, reliance on training, and understanding of his crew's capabilities transformed potential disaster into controlled advantage. The crew's trust in one another, honed over months of rigorous preparation, proved the difference between chaos and coordination. Skill had turned potential luck into predictable success. Yet luck misfired enemy shells, slightly delayed torpedoes had also played its part. Recognizing the interplay between chance and mastery became an enduring lesson. Post-battle debriefs emphasized repeated motifs: speed as a tactical lever, initiative as the outcome of velocity, and cohesion as the multiplier of both. Exercises and reality had converged. 35 knots had allowed the Mogami to dictate engagement points, evade concentrated fire, and strike with precision. Without training, discipline, and leadership, that advantage would have been meaningless. With them, it became lethal. The human cost remained evident. Scars on hands, fatigue etched into faces, minor injuries reminding everyone of their mortality. The captain reviewed letters from the crew recounting their experiences, reflections on fear and adrenaline, and moments where instinct overcame hesitation. One entry stood out. The ship moves faster than thought, faster than fear. Every maneuver a test, every decision a weight. I trust my captain and my comrades to keep us alive. The personal stakes underscored the abstract lessons of speed and skill. Repairs continued over the next hours. Engineers and sailors coordinated like clockwork, fuel, recalculated ammunition, replenished navigation charts, updated all preparation for the next engagement. Speed had delivered victory, but would again demand precision and courage. Minor damage would be repaired swiftly. The ship's ability to sustain 35 knots had not been compromised yet. Every repair, every adjustment reminded the crew that advantage required maintenance, physical, mechanical, and human. As sunlight touched the horizon, reflection replaced adrenaline. Commanders assessed outcomes, noting that strategic victory had been achieved not by sheer firepower alone, but by the orchestration of speed training and human resolve. The Mogami had demonstrated that technological advantage without preparation was insufficient, and skill without speed was constrained. The integration of machinery, discipline, and leadership had proven decisive. The sea itself seemed to echo the lesson, calm waves lapping against steel, a silent witness to what had transpired. The motifs of combat, speed, initiative, cohesion repeated in memory, and record a reminder that every battle, while measured in numbers, is ultimately a test of human will against chance and circumstance. And in that reflection, the thesis became clear. Why 35 knots mattered beyond the battlefield. It was not just velocity, it was the embodiment of preparation, trust, and decisive action. It transformed potential into mastery, chaos into control, and shaped the outcomes of war itself. The Mogami rested briefly, engines humming a soft cadence while the crew stood watch alert, yet contemplative. Every sailor was aware that training, discipline, and leadership were as vital as speed, and that tomorrow or the next battle could demand the same precision, courage, and unity. The lessons of this engagement would inform doctrine, tactics, and the culture of naval warfare for years to come. Post-war analysis, 1945 and beyond. The war ended, but the lessons of the Mogami endured. Naval strategists studied her movements, her engagements, and the decisive role that speed had played. 35 knots had proven more than a number. It was a tactical philosophy, a principle integrated into post-war doctrine. Fast cruisers, rapid maneuvering, and disciplined coordination became benchmarks in naval engineering and training manuals. Every maneuver logged, every engagement analyzed, informed the next generation of ships and officers. Technological innovation followed the path that the Mogami had blazed. Turbine design, hull construction, and gunnery systems were all reevaluated with speed as a central consideration. Engineers understood that velocity could multiply. Firepower, that initiative could be achieved through movement, and that crew coordination was as vital as machinery. Exercises in peacetime emphasized drills at full throttle, simulating combat conditions, ensuring crews internalized rhythm, timing, and decision-making under pressure. Beyond technical manuals, the cultural impact resonated. Naval officers recounted the legend of the Mogami to new cadets, emphasizing how preparation, trust, and decisive action could transform a ship into a decisive instrument. The motif of speed dictating initiative became part of naval lore. Stories of split-second decisions, rapid maneuvers, and disciplined crews shaped doctrines, but they also shaped values, leadership under pressure, trust in team members, and mastery over technology. Historians noted that the Mogami's influence extended beyond naval tactics. Military education, war colleges, and strategy seminars referenced her engagements. Lessons of preparation and execution, combined with technological advantage, illustrated principles applicable across combat domains. Leadership studies highlighted how the integration of speed discipline and human resolve could tip outcomes even against numerically superior forces. For the public, the Mogami became a symbol of innovation and determination. Archival footage, battle reports, and personal letters preserved the narrative, allowing generations to understand the stakes and decisions behind steel and engines. It was not merely a story of destruction, but of how human skill and technology intertwined to create advantage. The ship's legacy became a case study in efficiency, foresight, and courage under pressure. Today, the lessons endure. Modern naval architecture incorporates the principle that mobility is as critical as firepower. Tactical simulations continue to reflect scenarios first observed in engagements like those of the Mogami. Training emphasizes that preparation, discipline, and cohesion remain decisive, and that advantage in technology is realized only through the integration of human decision-making. 35 knots was never simply speed. It was foresight, initiative, and precision in motion. For those who follow naval history, the Mogami offers more than spectacle. It offers evidence. Archival records, logs, letters, and repair notes allow us to trace cause and effect, to see how design, training, and leadership created lethal efficiency. It reminds us that history is preserved not in legend alone, but in documentation, in analysis, and in the careful study of actions and consequences. Subscribe for archival-based stories. Evidence over sensationalism. Witness history as it was recorded. Understand the decisions that shaped it, and appreciate the human and technological factors behind legendary outcomes. The Mogami's legacy endures in doctrine, in culture, and in the lessons that continue to inform strategy, leadership, and the value of speed, precision, and preparation in every domain.